Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a guided tour of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Before we get started, let's start off with some quick housekeeping notes. All lines are on mute, and we'll keep them on mute throughout the course of the call, which means if you have questions at any time, please make sure to use the Q&A box. If you want to comment on anything that we're talking about or having any technical issues, you can let us know via the chat box, making sure to send it to all panelists and attendees. So just drop us a note in the chat box, and if you're having issues, our wonderful webinar facilitators will help you out in there. Let's test out the chat box really quick. If you haven't already, sending to all panelists and attendees, please let us know where you are calling in from. If you are having issues with audio, we do recommend having the system call you. And then if you're having visual problems, just leave and come back and that should fix it. Lastly, we are recording this call. If you do not wish to be recorded, you can disconnect at any time. The recording and slides will be made available on the RSVP competition site. So welcome again, everyone. My name is Ann Oti, and today I am joined by two of my wonderful colleagues, Deborah Trouchon and Courtney Sutton, who you'll see in the chat and the Q&A box. We're really excited to bring this series to you for our 2021 RSVP competition. On the screen right now, you'll see two important links. First is the 2021 RSVP at cns.gov mailbox. I have it here for a caveat on questions today. I shared this on Monday, but because this is a competitive process, there are a few questions that we will not be able to answer for you today. If your particular questions are specific or require a lot of context and discussion, we can't address that today because we want to make sure everyone gets all the information that they need. So make sure to send an email to 2021 RSVP at cns.gov. The other type of question that we can't answer today, because of the nature of the competition, we cannot provide individual coaching. So we can't tell you what to put in your application, but what we can do is help you understand the rules and the requirements and the tools that are available. And then it's up to you to put together your best application for this process. Again, this is webinar 2 of a 5-part series that will be repeated twice in the next few months. And we hope that you will join us when you can. So we like to start off our webinars getting to know a little bit about you. So I will ask our webinar facilitators to put up the first poll question. Who here has received a federal grant before, including one from the Corporation for National and Community Service, CNCS? Go ahead and fill out that poll that you see on your screen, and we'll get a sense of everyone's familiarity with the federal government. I'll give you a couple of seconds to fill that out. All right, it looks like a good amount of you have received a federal grant before. The next question, how well do you know Senior Corps? And that is the grant program of the Corporation for National and Community Service that I work for and which RSVP is a part. Go ahead and let us know your answer to that. All right, looks like we have about 51% of you who are new, so welcome. And to those of you who are familiar with us or our current grantee, we are super happy to have you here. All right, the next question that we have, poll number 3, how would you describe the primary field of your organization? Senior Corps and CNCS and the national service community are very diverse. And we'll give you a couple of questions. Jude, can you see the polls now? All right. And it looks like we've got a little bit of everything here, which is good to see. Our next question for you, how did you hear about us? This is good for us to know, to get a sense of how you all came together here to come and learn alongside with us. All right. And then our final question, have you attended any of our other webinars? So our first session was on Monday. Awesome. So it looks like it's almost 50-50, but we're super excited to have you all here today. Let's get started with sharing the agenda for today. So in the webinar, it's going to be divided into 3 sections. We're going to start with a quick overview of competition basics. We're going to get everyone on the same page. And then we're going to spend most of our time walking through the notice of funding opportunity before we then do a recap and take questions and trying to answer those for you. All right, so to establish some basic facts about the competition, we are currently accepting applications now for the RSVP program in specific geographic areas. Our applications are due by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on September 1st, and to view the available geographic service areas, you will look at a document called Appendix A. Appendix A is a document that you'll hear us refer to a lot during this series, but it's a really important document related to this competition, and it lists out the specific geographic service areas that are open. The way this program works is that certain geographic service areas are open for competition, and they are tied to a specific amount of funding and a specific number of unduplicated volunteers that go with that. A volunteer being unduplicated just means it's a unique individual. The individual could serve with one program in multiple different ways, but you're only going to count that person once when it comes to unduplicated volunteers. As you look at Appendix A, you're going to see something similar to this. It has the opportunity number, the total annual funding availability, the number of unduplicated volunteers, and the areas affected. And that is all competed as a package. So when you apply, you'll be applying for a package of things, a specific geographic service area for a specific amount of funding, and to recruit and maintain that specific number of unduplicated volunteers. One of the resources that you're going to use, and we're about to have a tour of, will answer a lot of these questions that you might have, which is really exciting. The Notice of Funding Opportunity. This is your gateway to the competition. And to navigate there, you're going to go to nationalservice.gov/RSVP competition, the competition webpage, and then you'll click on this first link, which is the RSVP competition notice of funding opportunity. And I'm going to make some changes on the screen really quick. So everybody should see the NOFA. If you could give me a yes in the chat, just to make sure that the screen changed properly. Awesome, thank you. So the Notice of Funding Opportunity is an equivalent of a request for proposals or a request for applications. We call it the Notice of Funding Opportunity. You might hear me refer to it as a NOFO. One thing to manage expectations, I want to make sure that it is clear that the most important thing is that this is just a guided tour and it's not a substitute for reading the entire document and reviewing the other associated documents in depth. I'm going to spotlight a few specific things that I think are helpful to look out for. If you intend to apply and you want to have a competitive application, you must read the Notice of Funding of Opportunity and again, review those other associated documents. And then after our tour today, I'm going to ask a couple of questions and then open it up for you all to ask questions as well. Another managing expectations point to bring up, the notice that you pull up on the RSVP competition page does not have the highlights that mine does, but if you have a copy that is printed out or you have one open on your screen, feel free to follow along. So first off the bat, I've highlighted some important dates here. The application is due 5 p.m. Eastern time, and I'm going to reiterate, it is Eastern time, so 4 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Pacific on September 1st, 2020. We strongly encourage you to submit your application well in advance, and then it's our hope to notify successful applicants by January 2021. The next section in the notice has some background information about RSVP, and we're actually going to dive more into that on our webinar on July 20th, and that is repeated again on August 11th. CNCS, the Corporation for National and Community Service, has 6 focus areas and a key goal of capacity building. So when we look at the focus areas, there are disaster services, economic opportunity, education, environmental stewardship, healthy futures, veterans and military families, and then again, that key goal of capacity building. Applications must have some activity in one of these 6 focus areas. If you want to learn more about them, you can do that here, and each of the sections has a little definition on what programming in the focus area looks like. They're pretty broad focus areas, and you know, many of the organizations, you won't find an issue finding something to do within these 6 focus areas. Moving along to page 3, if you're following along in your own copy, funding priorities. So in addition to the focus areas, we have funding priorities, and these are different. So what I'll repeat again is that applicants are required to address one or more of the focus areas that were listed above, so disaster services, economic opportunities, education, and the rest. However, in addition to these focus areas, there are funding priorities, and these priorities sometimes overlap with focus areas, but are often more specific. So if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see for healthy futures, we have the access to care and opioid abuse. Or if we look at the education focus area, or sorry, priority, funding priority, we've got intergenerational programming right here. So these are priorities and they're not required. However, we are interested in supporting applications that address them. We'll spend some time looking at the selection process, and that is where these will come in again. So again, I'll say they're not a requirement. What is a requirement is that you have programming in the 6 focus areas. I'm going to jump to national performance measures. So we require that all of our grantees across the country in any program to measure their performance using this set of national performance measures. You have to do 2 things. So we've got these 2 bullets here. One, you have to manage At a minimum, the total number of unduplicated volunteers listed in Appendix A. And so when you see the number in Appendix A, that is the total number of unduplicated volunteers you need to recruit and manage in that geographic service area. And then we also have this additional requirement. For every $1,000 in annual federal funding, at least one unduplicated RSVP volunteer must be placed in work plans that result in national performance measure outcomes. So within the total number of unduplicated volunteers that you'll see listed on Appendix A, there is a smaller number sometimes of unduplicated volunteers that must be included in these national performance measures. The others you can include in something we call other community priorities. So what does that look like? So let's say you see an open area on Appendix A that is listed for $75,000, and it has 100 unduplicated volunteers listed on Appendix A. Based on our threshold, 75,000 divided by 1,000, you would have to program at least 75 of those 100 unduplicated volunteers into work plans that resulted in national performance measure outcomes. The remaining 25, you could do really whatever you wanted with. You could put them into national performance measure work plans. And then we also have another type of work plan called other community priorities. So again, for every $1,000 in annual federal funding, we need these volunteers programmed into performance measures so that we can get the impact that they are having. And that should make sense because we are a federal program and we want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. We're going to spend more time on performance measures during the session on July 21st and repeated on August 12th. So now we get into federal award information. We have the total amount of funding that we expect to give approximately this year. And then the individual amounts are based on the information described on Appendix A. This section also describes the project period. So we generally make a 3-year grant award. The initial award for the first year comes with funding, and then continuation awards for subsequent years depend on the availability of appropriations and satisfactory performance and are not guaranteed. So again, we make an award for 3 years with funding for the first year, and then funding for the second and third year are based upon whether Congress provides funds and satisfactory performance. So a 3-year project period with individual grant years within that. We're going to jump to cost share or matching. Let's read this section together. So applicants are required to match funds for their programs. They are required to match contribution in year 1 of the grant is at least 10%. The required match portion is at least 20% in year 2 and at least 30% in year 3. And subsequent years of the total program budget. So you have a sliding scale, 10%, then 20%, then 30%. But if you're an incumbent, that is somebody who is already, someone who already has an RSVP grant and is already serving a particular area, incumbents are required to budget and raise at least 30% of the total project budget from the beginning. In other words, if you already have an RSVP grant, you're going to come in at the 30% level, and then new organizations have the opportunity to scale up over the first 3 years. I'll add another caveat for incumbents. If I know we have over 900 opportunities listed on Appendix A this year, if you're interested in expanding and competing for additional service areas, if you were to successfully be awarded one of those additional areas, your match for that grant would be at 10%. But for the grant for which you're an incumbent, it would be at 30%. All right. the next section, I think I've seen some questions about how will the submissions be evaluated and what is required to be submitted with everything. It's in here, application and submission information. Probably has an answer to the question on that top of the list. What should I include in my application? We've outlined it here. Application content explains the different portions. The application is submitted in our electronic grant management system called eGrants, and you will see it has specific sections or modules for each of these sections. For those following along, we are on page 7. 15 double-spaced pages is the limit of your application as it prints out. So when you're almost done, print out your application and review it to make sure that it is within the page limit. Jumping around, I know I've said it a lot today, but I can't say it enough. Submission dates and times, Tuesday, September 1st by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, moving along, I'm going to jump to page 10. And I'll read this section aloud. So CNCS recommends that applicants create an eGrants account and begin the application at least 3 weeks before the deadline. Applicants should draft the application as a Word document, then copy and paste the text into the appropriate eGrants field no later than 10 days before the deadline. This is to ensure sufficient time to make corrections or address potential technical issues. And if you run into technical issues, we do have a hotline and a web form that you can use for assistance. And I didn't highlight it, but I will select it here. It's the National Service hotline here, and they can help you if you are having issues with eGrants. So again, we recommend drafting your application as a Word document and then moving it to eGrants, the electronic grants management system, when you are ready. Please, please, please do not wait until the deadline to do that. You have all the information that you need to start with the notice. And of course, if you want to, you can attend more training and technical assistance calls. And that is great, but don't wait until the last minute. Okay, moving to page 11, the submission of additional documents. So there are a couple of additional documents that are required to be submitted with your application. I did want to highlight the Applicant Operational and Financial Management Survey, OFMS. It is required for all new to CNCS applicants, so all new to CNCS applicants, regardless of funding levels, and then incumbents who are requesting $75,000 or more of funding. So if you're new to CNCS, and if you're an incumbent, or if you're an incumbent requesting $75,000 or more, this is a required document that you need to submit. Incumbents, some of you may have completed a financial management survey, the FMS, in the past. This is different, the OFMS, it's different document, and the old FMS will not be accepted in its place. The form needs to be completed fully, a response for every question, and if there are additional comments needed to explain your response, you should use the preparer's comments section that is on the document. And it must be submitted as a Word document. All other formats, including a PDF, will not be accepted. Just remember, applicants who are new to CNCS, incumbents requesting $75,000 or more, and must be submitted as a Word document. And you can find a link to the OFMS on the RSVP competition page. Your additional documents will be emailed to the email on the screen here, additional documents at cns.gov. And the notice of funding explains how your email should be sent. Okay, moving to page 12, and I think I saw a question about this in the Q&A pop-up, but in addition to what should be included in the application, many of you probably want to know what determines which applications will be funded. We're on page 12 now. Specific criteria is spelled out here, as well as the weights. We tell you what we are looking for in your application. So we've got the percentages up here, and then kind of a bigger breakdown. We talk about the narratives, a narrative that articulates theory of change, recruitment and development of volunteers, the plan and the infrastructure to ensure RSVP volunteers receive training, more and more. Everything you see here is the criteria that will be used to determine the most competitive applications. And then it ends on page 14, showing you how they will be reviewed. We have a panel of reviewers that includes both internal CNCS reviewers as well as external reviewers. And they will be reviewing and assessing applications based upon the criteria above. So make sure that your applications are responsive to the criteria listed on the notice of funding opportunity. Going to jump ahead to page 17, I believe. And just share again that CNCS anticipates announcing the results by January 2021, again contingent on the availability of congressional appropriations. And because we are a federal program, these grants come with a certain set of rules that guide them. And when you accept the funds from the federal government, you also accept the rules that come with them, and you agree to abide by these certain set of rules that help us all steward taxpayer dollars. You will see them here on page 18. You might be familiar with the uniform guidance. And the uniform guidance governs how grants funds can be spent across the entire federal government. And then CNCS, the Corporation for National and Community Service, also has our own requirements, one of which is to conduct national service criminal history check requirements. This is a process that applies to all staff who will be on the grant. There is a lot of information here, and there are also links on page 19 of the NOFO. I'll just scroll down so you can see that, which link to further resources. The cost of conducting these criminal history checks are an allowable expense under the award, so you can put them in your budget. And then the last thing I will highlight on the notice, and really I just want to have an opportunity for you all to ask questions, are these contact pieces. So again, the 2021 RSVP competition mailbox where you can send questions. I'm sorry about that. And then the National Service Hotline that you can call should you have technical questions and problems with e-grants. So let me pull up our slide deck again. While I'm making the screen change, Courtney, were there any questions that you wanted to point out?
Yes. So one of the first questions is how and when are unsuccessful applicants notified? And so I can answer that. All of the notifications should go out around the same time, and we're projecting that notifications will happen in January of 2021. So whether you are successful or unsuccessful, you will receive notification from us in January. Another question we got is about incumbent and the unduplicated volunteer number. So if you are an incumbent grantee, meaning that you are a current grantee who is going to submit an application for the area that you currently serve in competition, you do not have to restart your volunteers. You'll just count the volunteers that you have as unduplicated. So again, if you are a current grantee who currently manages the program in the area that you are applying for, you do not have to recruit a brand new set of volunteers for the unduplicated number. You can continue to serve the unduplicated volunteers that you service now. Debbie, do you see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A that we should answer live?
Appendix A, when addressing, which I know the NOFO does also address that, you're applying for as listed in Appendix A. So it's not just the area, but if it's whatever it says for unduplicated volunteers, as well as the amount, that's the application process for that. And there were several questions related to that.
I see we have a lot of questions about Appendix A, and for the sake of time and being able to get through the information pertaining to the Notice of Funding Opportunity, we're going to hold off on Appendix A questions until the end. So we do see the questions in the Q&A box about Appendix A, and we'll answer them as we can, but we're going to try to hold off on the majority of those until the end of the call.
Thanks, guys. I have a couple more slides and then we can dive into those questions. So let me finish up the slide deck and then we can get into the rest of the questions in the Q&A box. Really quick, in addition to the NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, there are other resources that will be important to you. And again, you can find them at the 2021 RSVP competition page. I think I saw that question in the chat, nationalservice.gov/RSVP competition. We have the grant application instructions, which are step-by-step guide for navigating our electronic grants management system, eGrants. We have Appendix A, most infamous, which we've referred to and we'll talk about at the end to answer some of your questions. We have Appendix B, which explains our national performance measures in depth. That's another topic that we are going to spend a whole webinar on later, I believe on the 21st next week. And then we have the work plan development worksheets, which will be very helpful to you in trying to think about how to plan your activities and how you can communicate your plans to us. And then finally, the frequently asked questions that we do update throughout the process based on the questions that come to 2021 RSVP at cns.gov. All of these resources, again, are on the 2021 RSVP competition homepage. And if you don't get the information that you need today and it's not in one of the resources, definitely send us an email at 2021RSVP@cns.gov. And I see Jeff put that in the chat. Thank you so much, Jeff. And then one more thing before we move on to our Q&A portion. I've got a couple more poll questions for you, kind of based on what we just went through in the NOFA. So if we can get poll question 1 up on the screen, please. The maximum amount of funding that you can request is $40,000, $82,500, $150,000, or listed in Appendix A. The maximum amount of funding you can request. All right, and I'll go ahead and end the poll. And looks like you all heard me repeat myself. So it is listed on Appendix A and is tied to a specific geographic service area that you intend to serve. The next question, when are applications due? September 1st, 2020 at 5 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. in my local time zone. September 25th at 5 p.m. Eastern, or the 25th at your local time zone. All right, you guys got this one too. Applications are due September 1st, 2020 at 5 p.m. Eastern. The next question we have: CNCS will not consider funding an application that does not include an activity in one of its 6 focus areas or capacity building, or one of its funding priorities. And I will end the poll. You guys are right again. We will not consider funding an application that does not include an activity in the 6 focus areas or capacity building. All right, we've got a couple more questions for you. True or false? Applicants may choose to include as many or as few volunteers as they wish in work plans that result in national performance measure outcomes. Give you a couple more seconds to answer this question. All right. Most people said false, and that's correct. You must program at least 1 volunteer for every $1,000 of federal funding that you receive into a national performance measure outcome work plan. Now the remaining, if, for example, in the example I shared earlier, if you were receiving $75,000, but were required to have 100 unduplicated volunteers, the remaining 25 volunteers can be programmed however you wish. All right, the next question we have: successful applicants are determined by specific criteria in the notice of funding opportunity, how well an application flows, the application narrative only, meaning your work plans and budget are not evaluated, or the weather. Give you a couple more seconds. And we'll end the poll. And that is correct. Specific criteria identified in the notice of funding opportunity. And then our last question: if you have questions, you can send them to 2021 RSVP at cns.gov, a CNCS portfolio manager near you, me, or the head of the Corporation for National and Community Service. I'll give you a couple more seconds to vote. End it. And 2021 RSVP at cns.gov. I will do my best to answer your questions today, but you should send an email to 2021 RSVP at cns.gov. Awesome. Well, thank you for participating in our poll. And now I will invite Courtney and Debbie back on so that we can go through the Q&A box. And we've got a good amount of time left to tackle these.
So we have a couple of questions about recruitment of unduplicated volunteers, and I want to just address it to hopefully clear up. I think maybe my answer was confusing. So there are, in some cases, incumbent grantees in certain areas that are already servicing volunteers. And so what we ask is that if you are awarded a grant and you are not the incumbent, that you do try to engage those volunteers who are currently serving as RSVP volunteers. However, there is not always an incumbent program, and so there are not always cases where there are volunteers identified in a particular area. So there are some cases when that is absolutely the truth, that there are unduplicated volunteers that have been identified by the currently managed program. However, every single area does not have a program that's currently being managed. Debbie, did you see any questions that you needed to cover?
I've been trying to answer the ones that are kind of individual. There's quite a few questions about the OSMS, whether or not to complete it. The Operational and Financial Management Survey is to be completed by all new applicants to CNCS, no matter what funding level you're applying for. And for any new or recompeting applicants who are requesting 75 or more in funding. So that'd be the reason why you would complete that. That's one common question I've seen. I do think in addition to some of the resources that you'll find on the application page, you will find the additional instructions for what forms need to be completed. I've seen a couple questions that previous years we've asked for quite a bit more documents than what the NOFO or the instruction page says. Please follow what the NOFO is asking for. That is what is required for this year.
There's a question here about in-kind match. So the question is, do volunteer hours count as in-kind match? So this question is a little complicated. Your RSVP volunteers who are serving as volunteers on the grant would not count as match. However, if there was some sort of like in-service or training that you hosted for your volunteers, and you had someone come in to speak, so let's say you did a training on elder abuse and you were able to get someone to come in and speak to your volunteers about elder abuse, that person's time that they spent presenting to your volunteers could be used as an in-kind match. However, the volunteers who actually serve on the grant do not count as in-kind match.
There are a couple Appendix A questions that I'm seeing that I'll try to cover. So I saw a question earlier about whether or not there was more than one grant for each geographic service area. So there will only be one successful applicant awarded a grant for a particular geographic service area. I saw a question about if your geographic service area that you wanted to serve was not on the appendix, could you apply for that service area? So if the service area that you are interested in is not there, you cannot apply for that service area. However, if you are located outside of a geographic service area, so maybe your neighboring geographic service area is listed on the appendix, you can apply for that. And if awarded though, your project would need to serve the geographic service area exactly as it was described in Appendix A. I'll also take this opportunity to say that if you don't see your geographic service area on Appendix A, but you're still interested in national service opportunities, to continue to check our funding opportunities page. AmeriCorps is going to go through their competition cycle soon. Our other senior corps programs will be going through competition soon as well. So if you don't see it for RSVP, you might see it for some of the other programs.
Just to do a really brief recap on Appendix A, because there are quite a few questions in there. So Appendix A is a listing of areas that are currently open for competition. That means that anyone is able to apply to those areas. So whether there's an incumbent in that area or not, if you're interested in applying, you can submit an application for the area. On Appendix A, you'll see, and can we go back to that slide actually that has what's on Appendix A? But on Appendix A, there is a listing of a service area, so it'll be a county or a group of counties in a state, an amount of funding that is available for that area, and then a number of unduplicated volunteers for the area. When you're submitting your applications, you need to submit for the area as it appears on Appendix A. So, for example, with this Alabama area, you would have to apply for the $141,000 with the plan of servicing 1,109 volunteers. So if I were in Fairfax County, Virginia, and Fairfax County was on Appendix A and I was interested in applying, and let's just say it was listed at $75,000, I would have to service 75 volunteers in Fairfax County with the $75,000. So I would have to write the application for the area as it is on Appendix A. There's a question, Ann, that maybe you can answer about match fund verification letters. So can you just explain what those are or what they might be for someone who is submitting an application for competition? I think we may have lost Ann for a second. So I'll try to answer it, and then Ann, please feel free to jump in and correct me. So the match fund verification letter is just a letter from your funder or from your agency stating that these are funds that you are anticipating to have to support your operation of the program. So it doesn't necessarily have to be guaranteed. Your agency could write another grant that you would want to use towards the match. And so that would be kind of the verification at the time that you are working towards meeting the goal of making the match on the grant. And did we get you back?
I'm so sorry. I was speaking and had a great conversation about the match fund letter on mute, but you covered it, Courtney. Sorry about that.
No problem. I'm glad I got it right. Debbie, did you see anything else that we should cover here?
No, I think we covered the main questions. Yeah, I think we're good on that. Yeah.
There is one question here about COVID. I think I'll just speak for the three of us in saying that we understand the uncertainty of the time at CNCS. And so while we all don't have the answers, we do understand that people and agencies are dealing with how to move on and how to start back up due to COVID and the concerns around vulnerable populations and people being able to safely volunteer. We encourage everyone to follow CDC guidelines and your local health department guidance, but we can't speak specifically to what you should propose in your application or how your program should run in response to the pandemic.
I saw another question about Appendix A asking when Appendix A will be updated. So we are given updates on a daily-ish basis, and we try to get new versions of the appendix the following day.
There's one question here about multiple areas. So if you apply for more than one area, you will receive 2 separate grants if you're awarded at the time of awards. And then once your grant is started, so if you apply for 2 separate areas and you're awarded both of those areas, you will start with 2 separate grants. You do have the opportunity, once your grants are awarded, to request a grant merger, and that would combine those 2 grants into one. So you will submit applications for each area that you're interested in, and anything that you're awarded will be an individual grant. And once you're awarded, if you have multiple awards, you can request to have those merged into one. And there's one more, I think, if you could answer. So the question is about work plans and if there's a requirement to submit work plans because the work plan worksheet is for planner purposes only. So can you speak to how work plans are submitted?
Sure. So the work plans are actually the real work plans, I should say. The real work plan lives in the electronic grants management system in eGrants. So it's a part of your um, application. So just like for the narratives, we recommend using Word to draft out what you're going to say and then copy and paste that into the appropriate sections in the narrative. We recommend the same thing for the work plan section. So you would use, if you wanted, you don't have to, but you would use the work plan development worksheets to kind of draft out what you want to say within the work plan and then copy and paste that into eGrants.
A couple of questions on NSCHC were here. Can you speak to the requirement for NSCHC and who is required to receive clearance and background checks?
For RSVP program and senior core, the individuals who need to go through the NSCHC National Service Criminal History Check process or requirement are those who will be paid by the grant. So individuals working on the grant. This is a little different. So if you are a FGP or an SCP grantee coming to us, maybe interested in applying to RSVP, this is a little different in that the RSVP volunteers do not need to go through NSCHC, just staff.
So just to go over a couple of things about Appendix A again. So if you do not see your area on Appendix A, please keep in mind this is the third year of competition cycle. And so it is a possibility that the area that you are in or you're interested in has been competed in one of the previous two competition cycles. We do RSVP competition every 6 years, and so if you don't see it, it could have been competed before, and it will come up again. It just won't come up again until our next competition cycle, which is 6 years from now.
Along the lines of that, I saw a question asking about the opportunity number and what it signified. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really mean anything. It just helps us keep these opportunities organized. I've seen a couple of questions asking if there was a minimum amount of funding to apply for. You have to apply for what is on Appendix A.
There's a question about building the number of volunteers and if there's a grace period. And then there was another question about how long an awarded program would have to meet the volunteer number. So, Anne, can you speak to how soon we would expect to see grantees that are awarded a new program reach the unduplicated volunteer number?
Sure. And you'll see this on the notice, but a requirement of the award are progress reports that happen twice a year. So you would report to us about twice a year what your successes are in terms of recruiting volunteers and your progress towards meeting the goals on your work plan. When we in turn review your application, or not application, sorry, when we in turn review those reports, it's not until the final report where you are expected to have your full number of volunteers. So we
There's
understand that this is,
also,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Courtney.
sorry, there's also a couple of questions here about the OFMS survey, and I'm going to ask you all to submit those questions to the 2020 RSVP email account. We can get you answers for those, but I don't think we have those specific answers at the moment. So we do want to be able to get everyone the resources that they need and the information they need to submit the OFMS survey. And so please just submit those questions to 2021 RSVP at cns.gov and we'll get you answers. And thank you, Jeff, for entering that email address in the box again.
I saw a question about when the recordings of these sessions will be available. I will get Monday's recording and today's recording onto the website by Friday latest.
A question about station rosters. If you are an incumbent grantee, you do need to fill in the station roster in the application. If you are not currently an RSVP grantee, you will not be expected to complete the station roster section of the application. However, if you are currently an RSVP grantee who is entering an application for the area in which you currently serve, you do need to enter your station roster into the application. There's one last question, I'm sorry. In light of time, I just want to be able to answer this. The 3-year program. So when we say a 3-year program, your initial award is for 1 year. And with the anticipation that with good progress and appropriations, we're able to renew the grant for a second and third year. So every grant is a 3-year cycle, but you'll only receive 1 year of funding at a time. So if you are awarded a grant through this competition, you will get the amount of funding that's listed on Appendix A for that service area for the first year. And then with, I don't want to say good performance, but with good performance and appropriations pending, you would then be able to continue your grant for year 2 and 3.
Do we have another question for the good of the group?
A quick one about focus areas. If there's more than one focus area that an agency is interested in covering, can they be combined in one application?
Yes. So when you go into, it's called the performance measure module of the application, you will be able to select all the focus areas that you are interested in creating a work plan for. You're not, you don't have to just do one. So if you want to do healthy futures and education, you can have 2 or multiple work plans in both of those focus areas. All right. I've read through some of these pending questions, and I believe that we've answered a majority of them. Debbie and Courtney, is there anything that I am missing before we sign off for today?
I think we got as many as we could in. I would just echo again, if you did submit a question and you don't think you got the answer, please feel free to email us at the 2021 RSVP mailbox, and we'll try to get you the best answer we can. Just as a reminder, this is a competition and we are unable to answer questions that are specific to one particular area or your particular situation. And so answers will be very general, and that is just based on the fact that this is a competition and we can't provide any specific information that would give a competitive edge to anyone over another applicant.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, the email in the chat, 2021 rsvp@cns.gov, for any other questions that you have. Next week, we've got 3 more webinars to complete cycle 1 of the series. If I don't get to talk to you then, I wish you lots of luck in developing your application. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Bye.